My grandma left me a $1,250,000 mountain lodge. At the will reading, my father, who kicked me out at 18, with a trash bag, leaned over and whispered, "We'll run it together." Then the lawyer read one sentence that froze the room and turned his smile into pure panic. My name is Olivia Carter. I'm 27 now, and for years I thought I'd finally built a life that didn't include the man who kicked me out at 18 with a suitcase and a trash bag. Then I walked into the will reading. He was already there, sitting at the polished table like he still owned the place, smiling at me like nothing had ever happened. "This is good, kiddo," he whispered, soft but deliberate. "Grandma's lodge is worth at least $1.25 million. We'll make it a real family company together." Together. That word hit harder than any slap he ever gave me. He hadn't paid for my rent or food in 9 years. He never called when I was sleeping on a friend's couch, working double shifts just to stay in school. And now suddenly it was together. The only reason I was even in that room was my grandmother. Eliza was the one who taught me how to scrub floors, not as punishment, but with pride. She was the one who slipped $400 into an envelope labeled emergency cookie money when she knew my bank account was at zero. She looked me straight in the eye once and said, "If he throws you away, I'll keep you." Weeks after her funeral, I got the official letter summoning me to the reading of her will. I knew she owned a mountain lodge. Our old chalet clung to Willow Creek Mountain like a stubborn secret. I just never knew it was worth over $1 million. And I never imagined the man who disowned me would show up pretending to be a loving father, already planning how to divide her inheritance. As the judge cleared his throat and turned to the final pages, a cold certainty settled in my chest. Whatever Grandma had written, my father believed it would work in his favor. And whatever happened next would either save me or break me in front of people who were already waiting to watch me fall. Before I tell you what was read and what I did when I walked out of that room, tell me what time it is where you're listening from. I want to know how far my grandmother's last wish reaches. That conference room felt way too small for the amount of history trapped inside it. The judge sat at the head of the table, papers aligned with obsessive precision. My father sat on one side, though I couldn't bring myself to say his first name out loud back then. My mother and sister were beside him. I sat alone on the opposite side, next to John Evans, the lawyer my grandmother trusted for years. John adjusted his glasses and gave me a quick nod. Not comforting. More like a warning. "This will sting, but it's necessary." The judge spoke. "We are here to formalize Eliza Carter's last will and testament. All parties present." My father cut in immediately. "Yes, Your Honor," calm, polished. "We're eager to honor my mother's legacy as a united family." I almost laughed. The last time I'd seen him before Grandma's burial, he was screaming at me to get out of his house, calling me ungrateful because I refused to drop out of college to work for him full-time. My mother, Joyce, sat rigid, hands clenched until her knuckles went white. She didn't look at me once, just stared at the wall like eye contact might shatter something inside her. My sister Mara leaned back in her chair, perfectly put together as always, like this was just another business meeting. Her eyes slid over me with that familiar mix of curiosity and resentment, not a sister's look, a rival's. The judge nodded at John Evans. "You may proceed." Eliza Carter, being of sound mind and body at the time of signing, hereby declares this her final will and testament. Sound mind. I saw my father's jaw twitch. Just barely. Like he'd tasted something sour. He leaned toward Mara and whispered, "We'll make sure that phrase doesn't stand." My stomach dropped. Of course. They had a plan. Cry about Grandma. Talk about memories. Then quietly argue she was confused, manipulated, too old to know what she was doing. They weren't here to mourn. They were here to win. As John read through smaller bequests, charity donations, sentimental items for distant relatives, I could feel my father's impatience building. His fingers tapped an angry rhythm on the table. Mara checked her phone under the table, the screen lighting up and going dark like a pulse. My mother flinched every time they moved but said nothing. I stayed still. Blank face. Repeating one thought like armor. Grandma knew them. Grandma knew me. She didn't sign anything by accident. Still, one question kept burning under my skin. Why was the man who abandoned me so confident? Like all he had to do was show up and smile? If you were sitting across from the people who broke you, would you believe a single word they said about family? John Evans' tone shifted as he reached the main section. Even the judge straightened. Now, John said, we come to the disposition of the primary asset. The mountain lodge on Willow Creek Mountain, currently appraised at approximately $1,250,000. The number just hung there. Mara snapped upright. My father stopped tapping. My mother finally looked at me. In regard to the lodge, John continued, Eliza Carter writes, this lodge is my life's work, my refuge, and my apology to my granddaughter. My throat closed. Apology. She never owed me one. But she knew someone else did. I bequeath full operational control and beneficial interest of the lodge. John read, to my granddaughter, Olivia Carter, under the conditions listed below. My father exhaled like he'd won. Smiled. Put a hand over his heart like this was all so touching. That's wonderful. He said, already leaning toward me. See? She wants you to have it. We'll help you run it, sweetheart. Well, I'm not finished. John cut in sharply. The judge raised his hand. Silence. My father's smile froze. Condition 1, John said, for a minimum of 4 years from the execution of this will, the lodge shall not be sold, leased, mortgaged, or otherwise transferred without the explicit written consent of Olivia Carter. A muscle jumped in my father's cheek. Mara's lips parted like she couldn't process what she'd just heard. Condition 2, John continued calmly. No family member including but not limited to my son Mike Carter, my daughter-in-law Joyce Carter, or my granddaughter Mara Carter may exercise managerial authority, hold controlling interest, or issue binding decisions regarding the lodge without the express written approval of Olivia Carter. The room went dead silent. My father broke it with a sharp, humorless laugh. She's joking, he muttered. She has to be joking. John Evans didn't react. He just looked down and kept reading. Condition 3, he said evenly. If any family member contests this will, challenges Olivia Carter's authority, or attempts to undermine the operational independence granted herein, the lodge shall be transferred immediately and in full to the Charity Haven for Youth. No member of the Carter family shall retain ownership, profit, or rights related to the property. Mara actually gasped, one hand flying to her mouth. My mother shut her eyes like she was bracing for a crash. My father went completely still. For the first time since I'd walked in, the confidence drained out of his face. That's insane. He snapped. My mother loved this family. She wouldn't threaten to give everything away to strangers over some childish wording. John slid a document across the table. Quiet. Controlled. This clause was drafted by Mrs. Carter herself, in my presence, he said. Reviewed multiple times. She was fully lucid each time. I stared at the paper. My grandmother's signature sat there. Solid. Familiar. Under a paragraph that felt less like legal text and more like a live grenade aimed straight at my father's greed. If he pushed, he wouldn't just lose. We all would. And she trusted me to stop him. My father exploded. Or she was manipulated. He shouted. Old people get confused. She was rambling near the end. I heard it myself. You visited twice in 2 years, I said quietly. Every head turned toward me. You heard what was convenient for you to hear. Our eyes locked. 9 years slammed down between us like another stack of files. The night he told me to obey or get out. The echo of the front door slamming. The silence that followed. 9 years long, that's when I understood. This wasn't just revenge. It was a test. Could I protect what she gave me, even if it burned what little family I had left? If you were handed something that could vanish the second you showed weakness, would you risk it all to stop the people who already threw you away once? The will reading ended. The war started in the hallway. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, washing everything in a harsh, sterile glow. Every expression looked uglier, out here. Every lie easier to spot. Mara stormed ahead, heels cracking against the floor like gunshots. My mother lagged behind, clutching her purse like it could swallow her whole. My father stepped directly into my path. We need to talk, he said. Low voice. Loud enough that Mara and Joyce could still hear. I crossed my arms. Reality is a signed will and a judge who just heard it. His smile was tight. Pulled too far. No warmth. Reality, he said, is that you have no idea how to run a multi-million-dollar property. You've never managed staff. Marketing. Bookings. Maintenance. You're sentimental. Guilty. You'll drown. Good thing I learned how to swim when you threw me out, I shot back. His eyes flared. Don't start with that drama. You were rebellious. You refused to work in the business. You chose to leave. I remembered him looming in the doorway 9 years ago. telling me to take my attitude elsewhere. To see how far that degree got me when I was hungry. Funny how, in his version, I just left. You disowned me, I said flatly. You told me I wasn't your daughter anymore. His jaw clenched. Words said in anger, he muttered. You know how family fights go. But this? He gestured back toward the conference room. This is generational wealth. Bigger than old arguments. Your grandmother wanted all of us to benefit. She was confused. Manipulated. Whatever. We can fix this. Fix this. We work together. He pressed. Adjust a few things. You're the public face. Everyone wins. Everyone? I asked. Or just you? Mara spun back toward us, eyes blazing. This isn't complicated, she snapped. You sign some papers. Dad and I get equal say. We turn it into a luxury resort. Investors are already interested. You really think your little memories with Grandma are worth more than that? Those memories built the lodge, I said. While you ignored her calls, I learned every creaky floorboard. Every guest story. She didn't leave me a cash machine. She left me a home. My father stepped closer. His voice dropped even lower. Listen carefully. If you try to do this alone, you will fail. Bookings will dry up. Maintenance will bury you. And when you come crawling back, it'll be too late. You'll lose your last chance to be part of this family. For a second, the old fear stirred. The memory of being alone. Counting bills. No safety net. Then I remembered who actually kept me alive. Not the man standing in front of me. The woman whose signature was now shielding me from him. I already lost this family. I said. The night you threw me out, you decided that for both of us. Grandma didn't give me this so I could crawl back. She gave it to me so I could finally build something that was mine. The charm vanished from his face. What was left was raw. You're making a mistake you can't undo, he growled. You think I won't fight this? I think, I said, that's exactly what she expected. We stood there in a deadlock, his threat, my refusal. My mother's quiet sob behind him. Mara's impatient scoff. Then he leaned in, nearly nose to nose. If you turn this into a war, he warned, don't cry when you lose everything. Not just the lodge. Your reputation. Your future. He turned and walked away, Mara at his side. Their backs disappearing down the hallway like a promise. My mother lingered. Her eyes were wet. Her lips trembled. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, anything. Nothing came out. She followed them. I stood there alone. Heart pounding in my ears. My father's threat echoing in my head. Was that a warning from a father, or a declaration of war from a man who couldn't stand losing control? That same evening, I drove up Willow Creek Mountain. My car was stuffed with boxes. My head was full of defiance. At the final bend, the lodge came into view. Half hidden by trees. Familiar and untamed all at once. Grandma made us preserve the wood siding every spring. It was weathered, but strong. Like her. The porch sagged a little, but the valley stretched out so wide it made your problems feel embarrassingly small. I stood there for a moment, then unlocked the door with the key that was legally mine. Inside, it smelled like pine cleaner and old coffee. It should have felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt like an answer. I didn't start with spreadsheets or revenue forecasts. I started with a corkboard. I pinned photos of families laughing around the fire pit. Kids racing across the yard. Couples watching sunsets from the balcony. On blank cards, I wrote Grandma's words. People don't come here for perfection. They come here to remember they're still alive. Then I planned family weekends, corporate retreats focused on reconnection. Off-season packages so the lodge wouldn't sit empty half the year. My revenge wasn't going to be screaming at my father. My revenge was going to be a fully booked calendar and a waiting list. So, this is the war room, Mark said from the doorway. He'd been my friend since college. The kind who once paid my phone bill with grocery money because he was tired of my number getting shut off every month. He studied the board. Photos. Maps. Notes everywhere. Very you. He said. Organized chaos. With passive-aggressive inspirational quotes. I laughed. First time all day. Grandma left me the lodge, I said. And a nuclear clause that hands it to charity if anyone contests the will. My dad is already vibrating with rage. He's coming. I just don't know when. Then we make this place so solid. Mark said that when he does, he runs straight into a wall of sold-out dates and glowing reviews. So we got to work. Local contractors fixed the roof, plumbing, and wiring without stripping the lodge of its character. I turned a storage room into a small library, board games, kids' books, mismatched chairs. Mark built a basic website, then bullied me into filming a shaky phone video about Grandma's lodge and what I wanted it to be. Bookings started trickling in, an anniversary couple, a family reunion, old friends escaping the city. Guests wrote in the guest book about how peaceful it felt, how it reminded them of being young again. Every good review felt like another brick between my father and what he wanted. Of course, he didn't stay quiet. Rumors started spreading. That I was in over my head. That the lodge was unsafe. That Grandma had been confused when she changed her will. I heard someone whisper in the grocery store. Mike's just protecting what's rightfully his. That girl can barely run her own life. I pretended not to hear. Later that night, it hit me anyway. Mark and I sat on the porch, watching the taillights of the last guest disappear down the mountain. What if he's right? I asked. What if I run this place into the ground and prove everything he ever said about me? Mark didn't look at me, just stared at the horizon. He disowned you because you wouldn't be his employee, he said. Now he's furious because you're not his subordinate here either. He paused. Failure proves him right. Success will drive him insane. Which do you want? I thought about my father's face when the charity clause was read. The moment his confidence cracked. I thought about Grandma's signature. Success, I said. Good, Mark replied. Then every time you doubt yourself, ask this: are you really going to let the man who threw you out decide what you're capable of? Success came slowly. But it came. Within months, weekends were fully booked. Photos of the lodge started showing up online. Captions like hidden gem and feels like visiting your favorite grandparent, but with better Wi-Fi. I should have relaxed. Instead, the anxiety just changed shape. One afternoon, I was processing invoices when my phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Carter? A crisp voice said, "This is Attorney Collins," representing Mike and Mara Carter. I didn't even sit down before I needed to. Go on, I said. Your father and sister have concerns about the circumstances under which your grandmother's will was executed, he said. They believe she was unduly influenced and lacked mental capacity. They were barely around, I said. How would they know her condition? That's exactly why we're taking it to court, he replied. We're filing a petition to contest the will and requesting an emergency hearing regarding the lodge. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. Not shocked. Just confirmed. The war had officially started. I called Mark. He was there within an hour, laptop under his arm, jaw set. We knew this was coming, he said. Now we know when. So we build our case. From then on, my life split in two timelines. In one, I ran the lodge. Greeting guests. Fixing lights. Testing menu ideas. Joking with kids in the yard. In the other, I became a strategist. Digging through Grandma's medical records. Collecting statements from her doctor. Tracking down people who'd spent time with her during her final year. John Evans helped us organize everything. Eliza anticipated this, he said during a late-night meeting in his office. That's why she insisted on recording the day she signed the final version of the will. The video started playing. There was my grandmother on the screen. Her hair was thinner, her cheekbones sharper than I remembered, but her eyes, those were the same. Sharp. Amused. Completely aware. If my son ever tries to say I didn't know what I was doing, she said calmly to the camera, you tell him I've known exactly what he was doing since he was 15 and learned to lie without blinking. I laughed through tears. She was calling him out from beyond the grave. While that video existed, my father was telling a very different story around town. He showed up everywhere with my mother and Mara. Church events. Community meetings. Business lunches. Shaking hands. Lowering his voice. Mom was confused, he'd say, looking devastated. She loved all of us. That lawyer twisted her words. Now Olivia's being used. We just want to bring the lodge back into the family where it belongs. Some people believed him. Some didn't. I could feel it in the way neighbors looked at me. Polite smiles from some. Whispered conversations from others as soon as I walked by. The weight of it was exhausting. There were nights I lay awake in one of the guest rooms, staring at the ceiling, playing out every worst-case scenario. My father winning. The lodge ripped away. Grandma reduced to a line item on a spreadsheet. One night, close to midnight, I went down to the kitchen and found my mother sitting at the table in the dark. She jumped when I turned on the light. "I couldn't sleep," she said quietly. "Mike's determined," I said. She looked older than I remembered. Deep lines carved into her face. "He borrowed money," she whispered. "Promised investors that once the will is corrected, the lodge will be collateral for a new project. If he loses." She started, then stopped. I didn't need her to finish. If he lost, it wouldn't just be humiliation, it would be financial ruin. For a moment, guilt flickered. Then I remembered all the times she watched him crush me and said nothing. "He chose this," I said. "He chose to gamble on taking something Grandma didn't want him to have." She looked at me with grief and something like envy. "You sound like her," she said softly. She never backed down either. I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. "Mom," I asked, "do you believe she knew what she was doing when she wrote that will?" She stared at the table for a long time. Then she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "She knew exactly what she was doing." "Would you say that under oath?" I asked. She flinched. I don't know." She stood abruptly, grabbed her coat, and left without another word. As the door closed, something clicked. This wasn't about facts. It was about who was brave enough to say them out loud. When you've spent your entire life under someone else's control, how hard is it to finally tell the truth knowing it might break them? The day of the emergency hearing was dark and bitterly cold. Like the sky was on our side. I dressed simply. Black dress. Blazer. The old silver necklace Grandma gave me when I turned 15. Mark drove, hands tight on the steering wheel. "Remember," he said, "this isn't about proving you're perfect. It's about proving she trusted you and that she had every right to." The courtroom felt too bright. Too exposed. My father sat at the plaintiff's table in an expensive suit. Confident. Like this was already his win. Mara sat next to him, scrolling on her phone while their lawyer lined up documents. My mother sat behind them, eyes glued to the floor. On my side, it was just me, John Evans, and Mark. The judge, the same one from the will reading, called the session to order. "We are here to consider the petition filed by Mike and Mara Carter to contest the will of Eliza Carter, specifically regarding the Willow Creek Mountain Lodge." Their lawyer launched into a polished speech. Grandma was framed as a confused old woman, emotionally attached to her granddaughter, but no longer capable of making complex decisions. I was described as fragile, easily influenced, manipulated by John Evans into isolating Grandma from the rest of the family. My jaw tightened. I said nothing. Then my father took the stand. He delivered a flawless performance. Long hours. Sacrifices. His heartbreak when I chose to leave. His shock at discovering his mother had turned against him, near the end. He even dabbed his eyes with a handkerchief. If I didn't know him, I might have believed every word. John Evans' turn was quieter. Dates. Documents. Medical evaluations confirming Grandma's mental clarity. Emails where she outlined her plans for the lodge years before her health declined. Then he looked at me. "We call Olivia Carter to the stand." My legs felt heavy walking up there. But once I sat down and placed my hand on the Bible, something inside me steadied. I told the truth. I talked about the years I spent at the lodge with Grandma. Sitting on the balcony, listening to her stories about building it from nothing. I talked about how she winced when my father pushed her to expand fast and take on debt she didn't want. And I repeated the words she said about the will. "If your father wants the lodge," she told me, "he has to want you first. And if he can't do that, he gets nothing." My father's lawyer went after me next. She tried to paint me as bitter, spiteful, out for revenge. "Isn't it true," she asked, "that you harbor unresolved anger toward your father for disowning you?" "Yes," I said calmly. "Of course I do. But my anger didn't write the will. My grandmother did." "And isn't it possible," she pressed, "that your grandmother, out of guilt or confusion, overcorrected, that she gave you more authority than she truly intended?" "No," I said. "It's possible my father underestimated how clearly she saw him. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge tapped his gavel. Order. Then John Evans stood. The defense calls Joyce Carter. My mother went pale. For a second, I thought she might refuse. Then she stood. Slowly. Deliberately. Each step toward the stand felt like a quiet rebellion against a man she'd followed for decades. Mrs. Carter, John asked gently, you were present for many conversations between Eliza Carter and the family. In your own words, can you describe her mental state when she discussed her will? My mother's hands shook in her lap. She glanced at my father. His look was sharp. Warning. Then she looked at me. I didn't beg. I didn't nod. I just let her see the question I wasn't allowed to ask. Who do you want to be today? Eliza was stubborn, my mother said. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. She knew what she wanted. Even when we didn't like it. She remembered numbers. Dates. Details. Things from years ago. She wasn't confused. My father's lawyer jumped up. Objection, Your Honor. Overruled, the judge said. Continue. My mother swallowed. She told me more than once she was leaving the lodge to Olivia to manage. She said Mike would only see it as a business. She didn't trust him with it. The words landed heavy. My father's face flushed deep red. Joyce. He hissed under his breath. The microphone picked it up. What are you doing? She shook but kept going. Eliza wasn't manipulated. She said. She wanted to protect what she built. And she believed Olivia would protect it too. For the first time, my father looked truly stunned. Not because of the legal damage, but because the woman who had always stood behind him had stepped out of his shadow. The rest of the hearing blurred together. The video of Grandma speaking. Clearly to the camera, the doctor confirming her mental clarity. Financial records, showing my father's recent, reckless investments made on the assumption he'd gain access to the lodge. John Evans didn't just defend the will. He exposed motive. When closing arguments ended, the judge sat quietly, rereading his notes. The room was so silent I could hear my own breathing. Finally, he spoke. The evidence demonstrates that Eliza Carter was of sound mind at the time her will was executed. He said her intentions were clear. Consistent. Supported by witnesses and documentation. My father's shoulders went rigid. Therefore, the judge continued, the petition to contest the will is denied. The will stands as written. Operational control of the lodge remains with Olivia Carter under the specified conditions. Relief hit me so fast, I almost missed the next part. Furthermore, the judge added, due to the frivolous and self-serving nature of this challenge, and the clear financial motivations behind it, all court costs and attorney fees will be paid by the plaintiffs Mike and Mara Carter. The silence afterward was deafening. My father's mouth opened. Closed. No sound. Mara turned to him, panicked. Dad. We don't have that kind of. She stopped when she saw my face. No triumph. No smirk. Just done. Later. I learned the full damage. He'd promised investors access to the lodge. Taken loans expecting to refinance them using the property as collateral. The ruling didn't just cost him legal fees, it triggered clauses he couldn't escape. Within months, he sold off things he'd bragged about for years. Cars. A vacation condo. Shares in the company he once accused me of being ungrateful for not joining. I didn't ruin his legacy. His greed did. Outside the courthouse, my mother approached me carefully. I'm sorry, she said. For so many things. I nodded. Thank you for telling the truth. I said. That was yours to give. Not mine to demand. She nodded back, tears in her eyes. And for the first time, she didn't follow my father. She walked away alone. Mark stepped up beside me, smirking. Well, he said, that was karma in real time. I looked up at the gray sky, breathed in the cold air, and thought of Grandma. No, I said quietly. That was my grandmother's faith in me winning. Months passed. The lodge stayed full. Families came and went. Laughter filled the halls exactly as she'd wanted. Sometimes, at dusk, I stood on the balcony and imagined her beside me. Arms crossed. Smiling. You did it. I whispered. You made sure he couldn't turn me into collateral. There was no dramatic explosion. No shouting match, no cinematic revenge, just consequences. He couldn't control the outcome. He couldn't rewrite reality. And he couldn't escape the cost of his own choices. Still, watching kids race across the grass and couples sit by the fire, a quieter question lingered. When justice is served when the person who hurt you pays a price they chose to risk, what do you do with a part of you that wishes they'd simply chosen to be better?